So I'm going to try doing some online lessons, and the idea is that you can use these at your leisure as they're useful for you. My idea is that as you're watching the video, you can pause at any time, but periodically I'll say pause, and that would be a nice time for you to pause the video, and then you can kind of work through the lines on your own and see what you can do on your own. And then when you're ready to roll, you can press play again, and I'll sort of talk it through, and you can see how effective you were at doing it on your own. The idea is this is something where you can draw on it independently. You can work at your own pace, and if they prove to be useful, I'll make some more. So just to kick off, a couple of you had expressed recently you'd like to do a little bit more work with meter, or have a little bit more help with meter, or rhythm, as we might call it more naturally. So I thought I'd choose this poem, To the Virgins, to make much of time, by Robert Herrick. Let me read it first, and then we'll start diving into looking at it. So, gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he's to setting. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent the worst and worst, time still succeed the former. Then be not coy, but use your time, and while you may go marry, for having lost but once your prime, you may forever tarry. So, this is a poem written in the 17th century, and because of that, it's a good one to look at rhythm. One of the things you all should be aware of is that any poem written before the 20th century, unless it was written by Gerard Manley Hopkins or Walt Whitman or Christopher Smart, is almost certainly going to be written in a regular meter. It's going to be written with a regularity of rhythm to its lines. That doesn't mean to say that every line in the poem is going to have the same meter. It doesn't mean to say even that the whole line will all be iambic. It might shift and vary a little bit, but there will be a pattern. If the first line starts with 3 iambs and ends with 2 anapaests, and then the second line is made up of 4 trochees, the chances are the next stanza will follow that pattern, and the stanza after that will follow that pattern, and so on and so forth. And there may be a little variation within the lines, but basically you can expect there to be some kind of regular pattern, and your job is to sort of detect that pattern, that regular rhythmic pattern. So, we can look at this poem and we can see, just looking at it on the page, that we probably have a little bit of variety. You can see that the second and the fourth lines in the first 2 stanzas and the last stanza are clearly shorter than the first and third lines. So this suggests that we do have some kind of rhythmic variation, but we should expect that each of those lines will follow a similar pattern. Having sort of noted, okay, we've got some rhythmic variation, but we're looking for a pattern, we want to start determining what is our rhythm, what are the rhythms in each of these lines. We can make some guesses, some educated guesses, as we've talked about before. If we have 10 syllables a line, maybe it's iambic pentameter, there's a good chance it is. But that's not always going to help us. However, starting by counting syllables is usually a good way to go. So if we look at the first line, gather ye rosebuds while ye may, we've got 1, 2, gather, ye, 3, rose, 4, buds, 5, while 6, ye, 7, may, 8. 8 syllables. In the next line, old time is still a, flying. Old 1, time 2, is 3, still 4, a, 5, fly, 6, ing, 7 syllables. 8 syllables followed by 7 syllables. And this same flower that smiles today. 9 syllables, although possibly flower is 1 syllable. So 8 or 9 syllables in that line. Tomorrow will be dying, 7 syllables again. So our second and our fourth lines, which you'll notice rhyme, flying and dying, seem to have 7 syllables. Let's look at the second stanza. The higher he's getting, 7 syllables again. And nearer he's to setting, 7 syllables. When youth and blood are warmer, 7 syllables. If we go through this, we can see that the second line in each stanza and the fourth line in each stanza each have 7 syllables. Okay, that's a good start. Okay, we've got a good place to kick off there. The first and the third lines seem a little tricky. We've got 8, then we've got 8 or 9. If we look at the first line of the second stanza, the glorious lamp of heaven, the sun. Ooh, we got 10 syllables there, although, as we'll see in a little later on, maybe we can condense some of these words the same way we did with the third line of the first stanza. Let's look at the third line of the second. The sooner will his race be run. 8 syllables. That age is best which is the first. 8 syllables. But being spent the worst and worst. 8. Then be not coy but use your time. 8. For having lost but once your prime. 8. Okay, so those first and third lines seem to have 8 syllables. If we look at the third line of the first stanza, maybe we can squash flower into 1 syllable. That would make 8. What do we do with the first line of the second stanza? Can we shift that? Can we squash that into 8 syllables? I'll pause for a moment, let you think about that a little bit. Okay, so the glorious and heaven. All the other syllables, all the other words are 1 syllable words. They're all monosyllabic words. So glorious and heaven are the only ones we could squash. Glorious. I can squash glorious from glorious into glorious and turn it into a 2 syllable word. And heaven, we can sort of think of heaven as being 1 syllable. Heaven. It's certainly a 2 syllable word that can be easily condensed. So feasibly we could read those as glorious, 2 syllables, and heaven as 1 syllable, and make it fit that 8 syllable pattern. So you want to look for those sorts of possibilities. It could be that the extra syllables are there for a reason, to draw attention, or it could be that they can get condensed into the number of syllables that would make each of these lines regular. But broadly speaking, we can see we've got a pattern where each stanza has essentially 8 syllable line, followed by a 7 syllable line, followed by 8, followed by 7. All right, that helps. We already know some patterns that can't fit there, and it gives us some options in terms of what might be the meter. So now we need to figure out the stresses. We know that we're dealing with accentual syllabic verse. It's not going to be just syllabic. There are going to be stressed syllables because that's just the way they did it before the 20th century. So we want to try and find where our stresses are. The easiest way to do that is to think about our polysyllabic words first. 1 syllable words, the monosyllabic words, aren't always very helpful to figure out where the stresses fall. But polysyllabic words, if we've got a reasonable ear, or we do a little exaggeration, we can usually find where the stresses fall inside the polysyllabic words. Now, if we look at our first line, it's not very helpful because there's only one polysyllabic word, the first word there, gather. Rosebuds, I don't know which one is stressed. I mean, it's a hyphenated word with two monosyllabic words, so you can't really easily tell which one is stressed. If we look at the third line, the same a line of similar length, we've got today, but flower we said was probably going to be squashed into one syllable. So again, in that long line, we've only got one two-syllable word that can kind of help us with determining a rhythm. And that's not going to help us very much. We get a little bit more help with the first line of the second stanza, glorious. But heaven, we said we were going to condense into one syllable. So again, we've just got, glorious there. So we're not having much help. The third line in that stanza only has one two-syllable word. The first line of the third stanza is just all one-syllable words. The third line of the third stanza has one two-syllable word. And so these long lines are not very helpful to us. So I'm going to then take a look at the short lines. Well, the second line of the first stanza, again, doesn't help too much because there's only one two-syllable word. But the fourth line, that's much more helpful. We've got a three-syllable word, we've got a two-syllable word, and we've got two one-syllable words. So more than half the syllables, maybe we can figure out the stress-unstressed pattern. I'm going to pause and let you try to figure out where the syllable stresses fall in tomorrow and dying. I'll give you a little pause and let you do that. So tomorrow, tomorrow, we can exaggerate each of the three syllables and see what fits best. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. I think you can hear there that the first and the third exaggeration just were really off. But tomorrow, exaggerated as it is, sounds pretty close to the way we would pronounce tomorrow. Tomorrow, not so good. Tomorrow, not so good. But tomorrow sounds pretty close to the way we say it, tomorrow. So our stressed syllable is going to be this one here, tomorrow. I'm going to bold that so that you can see that stress. And then dying. We've talked about this before in class. Almost certainly the suffix, the ing suffix that just determines that it's a participle, is not going to be stressed compared to the root meaning of the word die. So the die is the bit that's going to be stressed there. Okay, so now we've got something, we're starting to pin down our stresses. Tomorrow and dying. We know the mo is going to be stressed and the die is going to be stressed. Okay, and the to and the ro and the ing probably unstressed. Let's look at the next short line. The higher he's a getting. I'll pause again and let you figure out higher and getting. So higher, again, should be pretty straightforward. The ER is just a little suffix that tells us it's a comparative adjective. The core meaning is high. That's definitely the bit that's going to be stressed. And just like we did with dying, get is going to be the core meaning. That's the bit that's going to stress, not the ing. All right, and now we're starting to see a clearer pattern. The participle, almost never going to be stressed. And so we have unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Oh, and look what we have up in this short line. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Okay, now we're finding a pattern. And both of them end with a stressed, unstressed. A stressed and an unstressed. All right, let's try the same here. It should be getting easier now. Nearer, again, it's comparative. That ER at the end is not going to be stressed. What's going to be stressed is the core meaning, near. And just the same as getting, set is going to take the stress. All right. Now, when we look at this short line, it doesn't look short, but we counted the syllables earlier. We found it's got 7. So it is, in terms of our ear, what we hear, it's a short line. Not much help at first glance. Warmer's the only 2-syllable word, but again, warm is going to be stressed. Is not. We could maybe start making some good judgments here, but let's come back to that in a moment. Let's go to the next short line. Time still, succeed the former. Succeed. Do we say succeed or do we say succeed? I would argue that we say succeed and we stress the second syllable. And former, like warmer, form, unstressed or stressed. It's the core part of the word, right? It's going to be stressed, and the is going to be unstressed. And then here we've got marry. Do we say marry or do we say marry? Are you going to go and marry somebody? Or are you going to go and marry somebody? I think you're probably going to marry somebody with a stress on marry. And you may not know the word tarry, but if it's spelled exactly the same as marry, and you're just changing the first consonant, chances are it's pronounced the same way. Tarry. Okay. Now, we're looking for a pattern, remember? We're going to assume that the same pattern is there in each of these lines. Oh, we missed out flying. Flying. We're going to bold the fly. So, clearly, every one of these short lines ends with a stressed followed by an unstressed syllable. If you're paying attention or you want to pause and look it up, you're going to know that a stressed followed by an unstressed is a trochee. But hold your horses. We haven't got there yet. Let's look at the pattern overall. And clearly, each of these lines begins with an iamb. Unstressed, stressed. Unstressed, stressed. Okay. Now, it's tricky for us here. We know this is unstressed, but which is stressed, the he's or the a? Which is stressed, the he's or the to? Which is stressed, the well or the be? You know, it could be a little tricky, but here we've got a word that we know is stressed in the middle of the line. And since we're looking for the same pattern in the rest of these lines, let's figure out where this stress occurs. This stress occurs 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables in. And then we're followed by 1, 2, 3 more syllables. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables in. Let's make still stressed. 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables in. Let's make will stressed. Oh, and look what we notice when we stress those one after the other. Still and will. They rhyme. We've got an internal rhyme there. Yeah? At exactly the same point in the line. When you start looking at these stresses closely like this, you might notice some elements like that. That's going to give you an opportunity in your analysis to say, oh, look, I noticed that we've got a stressed internal rhyme. It works a little bit like Kendrick Lamar. You remember that Kendrick Lamar song we looked at, where he had those rhyming patterns at the same points in different lines. Let's do it again with this. How many syllables in are we stressing? 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to tell us he's should be stressed. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's should be stressed. Oh, look, repetition at the same point in the line. He's gets the stresses. We can talk about that maybe right at the end when we're analysing the value of this poem. 1, 2, 3, 4. Blood takes the stress. And that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, which is going to be stressed more, and or blood? Makes sense to stress the blood. Succeed, we've talked about. 1, 2, 3, 4. May takes the stress. And now we're starting to see then a pattern with this line. We've got unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Let's put that pattern in everywhere. Unstressed, stressed. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. And look how that makes sense. Look what's stressed in this line. Youth, blood, warm. The words that carry real meaning. The two key nouns and the key adjective. Unstressed, stressed. Still. Makes sense to stress still. Succeed the former. While. Still and while give us a sense of time. In a poem that's called to the virgins to make much of time. So one might expect the poet to stress still, to stress while, to stress these things that talk about time. And again, you can then really enrich your analysis of meter by showing that once you've started scanning out these lines, you're noticing, look what words are stressed by the scansion, by the rhythm. And that's going to make you crack into that A grade on analysing rhythm. Let's keep going to the end. Unstressed, stressed. And then, forever we forgot about. Forever. Even without what we're doing, we should be able to hear ev is the syllable that's stressed in forever. It's not forever. It's not forever. It's forever. So there's our pattern. And one more. Unstressed, stressed. Time. Oh, imagine my surprise when time is stressed again. Time, still, while. All those time words are stressed. And now we see a pattern. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. What do we call that? Let's mark them off. The unstressed, stressed pattern. The unstressed, stressed pattern. The unstressed, stressed pattern. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. You know what that's called, right? Unstressed, stressed. I'll pause and let you look it up if you need to. Yep, it's an iamb. So these lines are iambic. The second and fourth line, these lines that rhyme with each other, it's the B rhyme in these stanzas, A, B, May flying, today dying. The B rhyming lines, the first and the third, they seem to have an iambic pattern. Unstressed, stressed. Unstressed, stressed. Unstressed, stressed. They're iambs. Now, what do we do with this final syllable? It's sort of an extra syllable at the end. Oops, let's try and write properly. Let's spell. Extra syllable at the end of the line. It's got a name. Oops. It is a slack syllable. So all it does is add a little bit of variation, makes it not such a clearly regular line. So we've got iambs with a slack syllable. And how many iambs? We're counting our iambs, right? We count our stresses to determine, is this a trimeter, a dimeter, a pentameter? And in this case, each of these lines has 1, 2, 3 stress syllables. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So 3 what? 3 iambs. And so we know that these lines, the second and the fourth lines of each stanza, are basically iambic trimeter, 3 of them, plus a slack syllable. Lines of iambic trimeter with a slack syllable at the end. Okay. Let's look at the first and the third lines now. Now, we usually have some clues, perhaps. Usually trochees sound very distinct. They have that sort of chanting quality. Anapests and dactyls have a kind of a rushing quality. If you're not really hearing that speeded up quality that an anapest or a dactyl might give, and you're not hearing that chanting, plodding kind of quality that a trochee might give, you might expect iambs. That could be helpful for us. We've said that there are 8 syllables. There's a good chance then that it's doing measures of 2 syllables in the pattern. Anapests and dactyls have 3. So if it's got the same things, if it's all iambic or all anapestic or all dactylic, it can't be anapestic or dactylic because that 3s don't go into 8, which leaves you with iambs and trochees. And so probably we're in the realm of iambs. You can kind of work things out a little bit that way. Although that can be tricky for you because sometimes that doesn't help if you've got a little variation, as we'll see. But we can use our 2-syllable words at least. Again, having, we know that it's not going to stress the ing, it's going to stress the have. And glorious, glorious. Glorious stresses the first syllable. We don't say glorious. We don't say glorious. We say glorious. And we say heaven. We know we stress the first syllable because we squash this into 1 syllable by sort of squashing the en at the end into the rest of the poem. So heaven, hev is the first syllable, is the stressed syllable, sorry. And we know that soon is going to be stressed, not the We also know that the is probably going to be unstressed. We know that words like of are probably going to be unstressed. The particle is probably going to be, the article is probably going to be stressed. And so, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, probably makes sense to stress then lamp, or a noun. Unstress, the preposition. Stressed, unstressed. Remember, we're kind of getting rid of this one because we're turning this into an 8-syllable word. So let's just sort of strike through that so we're not confused. And then this is our unstressed syllable, and then that makes sense for this to be stressed. Okay, let's see if it works to do that with the rest of it. Unstressed, stressed. Unstressed, stress will. Why not? Unstressed, stressed race. Makes sense. It's a noun. Be run. Be would be unstressed. Run would be stressed. Makes sense. Run is more significant. Be just inflects that or conjugates that verb. And so we seem to have an unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed pattern. Okay, let's do that here. That age makes more sense to stress age. Is would be unstressed. Best would be stressed. Unstressed, stressed. Look how once you establish the pattern, it gets easier to determine. Is here in the sentence is unstressed. Here it's stressed. The is probably never going to be stressed, or rarely. It makes sense to stress first. And then we go unstressed. Of course, being is stressed. ing unstressed. Spent stressed. The is going to be unstressed. Worse stressed. Look how this all makes sense, and is much more likely to be unstressed than the stressed worst, and so on. And then we can just follow the pattern, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. And we can just take it through. And let's just do the last line. Stressed, unstressed, stressed, whoops. Stressed, unstressed, stressed. And we've got to stress time again, lo and behold. Notice also how the stressed syllables come at the end to emphasize the rhyme, or in the case of this, to emphasize the feminine rhyme, warmer and former, marry and tarry, where the penultimate syllable is stressed. Now, we're going to ignore gather for the moment. In theory, it would be unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Now we get help determining whether it's rose or buds. And then while would be stressed, and then may would be stressed. Why do I leave out gather? You want to pause and think? Well, listen to it. Gather. It's not gather, it's gather. Very definitely, that's the stress. And so this doesn't fit in. Oh, I didn't do it here. And this, stressed, unstressed. Remember, we were going to make flower one stressed, syllable, unstressed, stressed. Today. We can hear, hopefully, the stress on today. Whoops. So, let's leave this first line alone for a bit because we've got some irregularity. But we can look at all of our other first and third lines. And what do we find? Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. What is that pattern? Let's mark it out. Firstly, how many stressed syllables do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you know what? First and the third lines are in what meter? Trimeter? Nope. You got 4 of them. Correct. Tetrameter. Sorry. Tetrameter. Well, what kind of tetrameter? Let's look at our pattern. Unstressed, stressed. Unstressed, stressed. Let's just erase the flower to remind us we're making that one syllable. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Which makes it iambic. Yeah, iambic tetrameter. So we've got a poem written in quatrains, 4-line stanzas, with alternating lines of iambic tetrameter, followed by iambic trimeter with a slack syllable. There is a variation here. We've got a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. Everywhere else throughout the whole poem, we're in the realm of iambic meter. But that first word, gather, is not iambic, but is what? Look it up if you need to. Pause if you need to. And then you should be able to say that it's trochaic. In fact, it's just one, so we could call it a trochee. So the line begins with a trochee. That draws attention to gather. The first line of the poem stands out even more because it's a trochee in the midst of all these iambs. Noticing that gives you something else to talk about. Showing you can spot that variation means that your analysis is stronger. And we talked already about his emphasis on time words, using the stresses in the rhythm to emphasize words like time and while and still and youth. And that he stresses his nouns, lamp and heaven and youth and blood. He stresses his rhymes. All these words that a rhythm can be used not just to create a prettiness, a musicality, but can be really used to emphasize particular important words. Draw attention to those things. Now, we could even go a little further. We haven't talked at all about what this poem is saying, but look at that last stanza. Use your time. He's talking to virgins, which in his time period would have meant virgin girls. He says, use your time, young virgin ladies, Use your time while you can. Go marry. Because if you get past your prime, you might wait forever. You might tarry forever. So go out and get married. I don't know what you think of that. I don't think much of that sentiment. Sounds like a bit of a sexist to me. Young virgin girls might be spending their time studying and learning how to become president of the United States and become great leaders of our nation. They have to be worrying about getting married quickly. So I don't care for Robert Herrick's sentiment. But man, he writes a pretty poem. He's got a masterful command of meter, and that can draw me in. The prettiness of his use of rhythm can seduce me. It can make me attracted to this poem. I can be lulled by the music into thinking, what a lovely, pretty poem, and not pry too closely into the sentiments. If Robert Herrick came up to you and said, hey, girls, use your time wisely and get married as fast as you can. Don't let yourself get past your prime. You'd probably think he was a jerk. But you read this poem with all the prettiness of the rhythm, and you also might be seduced into forgetting about the ideas of the poem, what it's saying. So rhythms, they can be lovely. It can add beauty. But beauty isn't maybe the only way we judge a poem on its merits. We might also challenge and critique the beauty of the poem. Yes, it's beautifully written, but if we don't care for the sentiment, maybe we might critique that beauty and say it may be beautiful, but that beauty perhaps has a danger in making us believe in his patriarchal propaganda. So there's a little look at rhythm. Hopefully that was helpful for you. If you'd like more, let me know, and we can do some more work with rhythm or anything else in some future poems. Otherwise, hopefully that was helpful for you. Take care, and we'll be in touch next time. Bye for now.